Relatively short agenda this evening, and delighted to report cross-party support for strictly sticking to the 3 minutes. So I'm grateful to colleagues for that. Can I start by asking if we have any apologies for absence? I don't think we do. No, none. Thank you. Can I ask if any cabinet member has a declaration of interest for any item on the? Oh, sorry, Wendy, were you looking to? Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting us know. Does any? Of course, yes, Malcolm's not with us, is he? Councillor Longley, apologies. That's great. Any declarations of interest from any member of the cabinet at all? No, that's good. We have some minutes from a previous meeting. This was the 12th of April. I hope that every cabinet member's had the chance to have a look at the minutes. Are there any queries or amendments? Thank you, Phil. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. I have no specific announcements this evening and not aware of any urgent business notified. In which case we'll move on to our first report, which is the highways contract, the procurements update. In a moment, Councillor Larratt, Phil will give us an introduction to this, and then we have a number of speakers. First was Emma Roberts. We'll take Emma off the list. We've got Councillor Danielle Stone, then Councillor Jonathan Harris, Councillor Dennis Meredith, if he's able to join us, Bob Purser, and then Councillor Wendy Randall. So Phil, just over to you to pick out the highlights. I think it's worth, may I just, no, I tell you, over to you, Phil, and I'll make some comments after, if I may.
Okay. Cheers. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this report is all about an update and the procurement of the contract. It's not about the detail of the contract at all. It's purely about how we deal with it. The report provides an update on the procurement of the new contract for West Northamptonshire and seeks to secure delegated authority to award the contract to the preferred bidder, who will be determined by the best combination of quality and price. The procurement of new arrangements for highways services commenced pre-vesting day and was initially overseen by governance arrangements involving all predecessor authorities. The delegations to make decisions related to the procurement were refreshed in July Cabinet last year, so that officers and members of West Northamptonshire Council could oversee and take decisions regarding the procurement of these services. The procurement process that has been followed has been competitive, involving initially 4 bidders to ensure that the authority achieves best value for money and quality services. And I have to say, I have no idea who the bidders are, Mr. Chairman, before anybody asks. I'm pleased to confirm that the new contract will have greater emphasis on clear and timely communication with members and residents, and it will enable the priority. Sorry, Sandra Barnes. Wow. It's a blast from the past. My apologies. Yeah, I'm pleased to confirm that the new contract will have greater emphasis on clear and timely communication with members and residents, and it will enable the prioritisation of schemes to take account of members and residents' priorities. The new contract will enable innovation, improvement, and social value over the life of the contract and secure environmental commitments from the contractors that align with our 2030 ambitions. Once the contract is awarded, there are various sanctions within the contract to ensure that the new contractor delivers these commitments. In addition, as an incentive for the contractor to perform well, If the contractor performs above targets, then they may be awarded contract extensions beyond the initial term of 7 years. Although the new highways contract for West Northamptonshire has been procured using the same process as the contract for North Northamptonshire, 2 separate contracts will be awarded, which will enable separate branding and autonomy of decisions related to the contract. To me, that's democracy, Mr. Chairman. We have also included a mechanism for the authorities to benefit from reduced costs if the same contractor wins both the West Northants and the North Northants contracts. The procurement process has been overseen by external legal experts and procurement advisors, consultants, to ensure the procurement is compliant. And it is for legal reasons that it is proposed that the award of the contract is via delegated authority. And I will ask Catherine to comment on that later on when I finished. I think that's it's important that we have that explanation, which I fully understand going forward. So I've not been involved in the detailed process. That's been down to officers. As I say, I don't know who the bidders are, but I'm very pleased that Nick Henstock's here tonight, who has been involved in the process, and any technical questions, I'm sure he'll be able to answer, or at least try to. I can assure members that the decision will be taken in consultation with myself as portfolio holder responsible for highway services, and with Councillor Longley, and we will be fully briefed regarding the preferred bidder. We also plan to arrange an all members briefing for the new contract, so that all members have an understanding and oversight of the new arrangements, and hopefully that will be once the settling down period, but before the contract becomes operational. Timescale to be agreed. Finally, again, in terms of timescale, the team are currently evaluating tenders from the remaining 3 bidders, and we will be in a position to make a decision regarding the preferred bidder in early June. This will be followed by a mobilisation period, with the new contract commencing in September this year. So that's basically the report, Mr. Chairman. The recommendations are contained within the report and at section 3, as always, and I ask Cabinet to support them. But perhaps Catherine might like to comment on the legal issues going forward before others do. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the nature of a very technical procurement of this kind that the evaluation and bids has to be done by those who've actually considered and reviewed the bids, and it would place constraints on decision makers who have not been in that position if it was left to them to make the decision. So by delegating the power, you're delegating it to the people who have got direct involvement in the evaluation of those bids, and therefore are free to make the right decision.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine, for that, and thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Phil.
And Catherine's support.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, indeed. And I mean, delegation decisions we're often cautious about, but given the importance of this being an absolutely spot on process, I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. Just a quick word on this. We all know across West Northants our roads need improvement, and we're hopeful that this new contract will do that. This paper is about contract procurement. So what it's not about is particular potholes or whatever. For the best possible response to members on their individual issues within their wards, we'd recommend you use the Members Inquiry Service. You'll get the quickest and hopefully the best answer on that. So I'd ask speakers to keep their comments to procurement process if they would. And those speakers are, first of all, Councillor Stone. Danielle, over to you.
So much to say in so much time, and that's partly because, Chair, we haven't had the opportunity to look at this in scrutiny. And I really regret that. I'm grateful that we're going to have a members briefing, but I think we need to do an awful lot more than that. And although the timescales are very short, I think this contract is so important. It's so expensive. It's got such a huge reach. I think it would benefit from going to scrutiny. I wish it had gone to pre-scrutiny, because I think there are 4 areas that would have benefited the whole process. One is, I think, scrutiny of the specs, a scrutiny of how the contract is going to be managed. We know that there's been problems in the past. We need assurances that that's not going to be repeated. It would have been really good if we had had a view on the percentages laid against social value of the climate emergency. I'm very grateful that those are in there. In my view, they should have been higher. And of course, we're all really interested in the costs. So I do have some questions, and it is about some of the detail, I'm afraid. So I know that the last highways contract, there was an inbuilt 3% a year increase for inflation. Inflation was never 3%, but the contractors got that anyway. So I'm interested in what the inflation rate is being built into this existing contract. I understand that there's quite a lot of money in the highways budget this year. We saw that in the budget setting process. There are 21 posts altogether, I understand. It would be really interesting to have a view on what that's going to mean in terms of this particular contract. We're hoping that 2 of those posts are to do with the climate emergency, and some of those other posts will, I hope, will be about managing the contract and making sure that it's coming in as it should be, but we need to know about that. In terms of Plan A and Plan B, can I suggest to you that there is a real tension between having a situation where we make efficiencies of scale and a tension between localism, where we're actually trying to grow the local economy? And I hope the people who are going to be looking at the tenders have a view about that, because my preference would always be to grow the local economy in terms of the social added value. I think if we are sharing a contractor with 2 different contracts, there's always going to be a tension between priorities being set by the 2 different authorities. So I think that is a balancing factor as well. So I think those are my main points, Chair. I don't really understand. I listened with care to what the monitoring officer was saying. I really do never understand why we've got the money, 1.4 million in this instance, to spend on consultants when we should be growing our expertise within the authority.
Thank you, Danielle. Number of points there. I don't know if you want to respond on any of those, Phil, or Nick is with us.
Yeah, we'll have a joint effort between us, I think. I think scrutiny, if memory serves me right, Chair, and you might remember this as well, I'm pretty sure that scrutiny were involved in the shadow stage when this was first raised and was discussed amongst all the districts and boroughs. There was some scrutiny engagement at that time. Who that was with and in what format, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure there was something that happened. Rebecca's nodding, so I hope that's the case. As I understand it, of all the posts that we're recruiting to, and there are quite a few in the Highways Department, about 3 or 4 of those are purely for contract management. We recognise that a contract is only as good as it's managed, and we need to ensure that we have full and proper contract management. Hence, 3 or 4 posts that we're recruiting to will be for that purpose. I agree with you, Danielle, on the percentages, and I think had I been in this role when the tendering was being considered and how it was going to operate, I would have probably had some views on that. I wasn't, so we've got what we've got, and we'll have to live with that, I'm afraid. But I personally think that we should have had greater emphasis on quality as opposed to value. And I think we probably should have been 60-40. That's what I would have argued for, but we're not in that position. So there we go. You talked about the local economy, and that's enshrined in the social value that we've put in that's included within the tender. So, you know, supporting the local economy is actually in there. You talked about the 3% inflation rate. Nick, would you like to? Yeah. You have to. I'm sorry.
Yep, I can pick that one up.
You
So,
it's on YouTube.
yeah. So the contract does include for inflationary increases on an annual basis. Similar to the current contract, they're based on engineering indices. So it's not purely about what CPI is or inflation is. It has to be a little bit more technically biased towards the industry, but they will be done annually on an April basis. I think that the way it will probably work is that the indices will be looked at during the autumn when we're budget setting, and then they'll be applied in the following April.
I think that's it, Chairman.
Lovely. Thank you both very much. Thank you, Danielle. Our next speaker is Councillor Harris. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. A few points I'd like to make queries, and again, I'll try and stick broadly to the procurement process, if I may. One of the main areas of concern that I have is in regards to the provision for restoration of standards. So we are aware that obviously during the darkest of times of NCC, effectively investment in roads was effectively stopped entirely. It's not clear from the procurement process or from our budget process what we set aside for that. I'll give you a couple of specific examples. White lines is one of those issues in junctions. I had a situation in my own ward recently where highways deemed it acceptable. Fortunately, Stuart's not here this evening, but he intervened and that decision was reversed. I mean, you literally couldn't see the white lines at the junction where there were no give way signs. And I could probably take you to at least 20 of those locally. So there's an issue about restoration of standards that concerns me. And similarly, similar vein to that is also pavement services. Again, just contacted recently by a resident in my ward who is actually quite worried about using mobility scooters on some of those services because they're also not very safe. So that's my first question really, is in regard to the restoration bit, let alone the maintenance issue going forward. There has been obviously some press about this recently in terms of the value of the contracts, and I'm grateful to Fiona for sending some information through in regards to that and trying to clear up some of those key points. One of the questions I do have, though, you won't be surprised to hear me say this is in regards to the net zero situation. Fiona's response to me referred to carbon neutral again, and you will have heard me like a broken record talk about the fact that carbon neutral isn't the same as net zero. And net zero requires us to focus on all emissions and doesn't really allow for a huge amount of offsetting. And I wondered whether we have actually consulted UK 100 on this in terms of the procurement process to make sure that it will fit with our pledge. We've made that pledge for 2030. And I just wanted to know whether or not we've actually consulted with UK 100 to check that we're fully compliant with this. My third area of beef really is public maintenance schedules, particularly for parishes. I've raised this issue before, and it seems very difficult to get public information about when things like gullies and drains are going to be cleaned and repaired. And even when they are announced or sought out, there have been situations where this hasn't happened. I can give you an example in Arthingworth recently, scheduled for February, but nobody's arrived, nobody's turned up. And it's a particular issue for parishes, particularly in some of the smaller villages, where if there are cars parked over gullies, which is often the case, then obviously they can't access them. So I'm hoping that this can be done as part of the new contract. I'm also hoping that we can do this before the existing contract ends, really, because it's very important for parishes to have that sort of level of information. I'm also a question in regards to the transition between current and future. Obviously, with any contract situation, there is always a challenge potentially around motivation and contract standards. It's just a question as to what mechanisms will be put in place to make sure that there is no deterioration any further than the issues that we have at the moment. Final couple of points. There was £870,000 in the budget for new roles. Councillor Stone referred to those earlier on, and I just wanted to know what progress has been made in regards to recruiting those roles. Yeah, the point was made earlier that obviously the management of the contract is just as important as the contract itself. And then my final issue again is, despite the very tight timescales between now and contracts being signed, I still hope that there is some space for it to actually be considered by scrutiny further. I believe it's one of our largest contracts, and I think therefore it should find its way there, even if that requires extraordinary meetings from scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Some good points. I think you and I have a meeting with a group, Jonathan, on Thursday, and embedding our new standards is something we've got some work to do. And I think that we just take that on the chin and note it. But some of the other points that Phil and Nick may want to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, restoration of standards is something I'm very keen on, as I think I've made known. White lines, you're absolutely right. Street sign cleaning, all that sort of thing. And we will have to look at the contract when it comes in, and hopefully we'll be able to include some of those, if not all of them. Yeah, it's one of my priorities. Let you be sure of that. Issues in parishes, yes, I fully accept that things haven't gone as well as they should, and I've been and visited several parishes, and we need to get that right, and be more customer friendly to parishes and work more closely with them. And I think when you look at how we've structured the contract, with it being more customer friendly, hopefully that we will achieve that greater working together and better working together going forward. I understand what you're saying about transition, and we need to make sure that things continue to work effectively through that period. But on the net zero, perhaps a bit more on the transition, where I know we are recruiting, but exactly where we are, I don't know. So perhaps Nick could give a briefing on that. And as to scrutiny, well, I presume we could give a briefing to scrutiny, but we need to make sure the process goes on and that we do follow due process, because this has been a long, lengthy, expensive process, and we need to make sure and follow it through to a conclusion without any legal hiccups. But I'm sure we could perhaps do something of a briefing for scrutiny going forward. Nick, do you want to?
Yep. I might do these in the wrong order, so apologies. New roles. We're in the process at the moment of disaggregating the service between North and West. Once that's complete, we go into a process to reorganise the West side of the team. And it's at that point we'll start recruiting new roles. We are actively working on job descriptions and ensuring we've got all the right information to allow us to go out to the marketplace to get new staff in, because we will need new staff in, and as we said, a considerable number of them. In terms of net zero, the contract, forgive me, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but the contract requires the contractor to be zero scope 1 and scope 2 by 2030, and to show us progress towards scope 3.0 as well. So they've got to develop a roadmap. I think, as Councillor Larratt said a little while ago, as part of their bidding, they have to give us commitments in the bid document of how they're going to achieve that, and to what level they intend to achieve that, and that forms part of the scoring. Those commitments then become contractual, and so we can hold the winning contractor to account for that throughout the contract. You're quite right in terms of offsetting. We don't want the winning contractor necessarily to just come and say they're going to offset, because that doesn't help. So we need to understand the gap between what we can do through changes in practice and changes in machinery and changes in plant, and then we'll work internally on how we get the gap down across the rest of the service. Transition, yeah, mobilisation is going to be key. The incoming contractor has written a mobilisation plan as part of their contract submissions, and we are again evaluating that at the moment. The current contractor has a mobilisation plan which is in place, and we will hold them to account through that mobilisation plan to deliver it, and that guarantees consistency of service throughout the period of time. So hopefully we've got it buttoned up, outgoing and incoming, so we shouldn't see any drop in service from where we are now. In terms of maintenance schedules, and I think the information that parishes get, we've spent a lot of time talking to the bidders about communication and communication with customers, and we've made it very clear to them that that is a very, very high priority for the council. And in terms of our quality scoring, 10% of the quality marks go to customer and communities. So we have ranked that. I think that's the highest scoring return they give us in terms of quality submission. So we've taken that from what members have said to us, and we've tried to apply that through the process.
Just one point, if I may, and that's the clarification. I hear what you're saying about the net zero issue. Given that we have made that pledge, I think it will be a sensible conversation to have with UK 100 to ensure effectively that's who we've made the public pledge to. And I think it would be useful just to check that we are going to meet that criteria by 2030. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for your comments. Thank you very much. So Councillor Meredith is not with us, so we'll welcome Councillor Purser. Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I've got three questions. Good evening, Councillor Larratt. We met at 9 o'clock this morning on the pavement of Phipsville. So yes, I suppose the first question is really, are we confident that we're going to have the capacity to monitor the contract? And linked in with that, I'm not sure previously that we had the right kind of relationship in terms of contract monitoring. And I was wondering what that relationship is going to be. And are we confident that we're going to be sufficiently arm's length to be objective about it, but sufficiently close to spot when things are going awry? So there's that area of contract monitoring, and whether that is actually something that scrutiny will have a role in, about how we do that contract monitoring. I suppose the second is that as demands, it's who drives promoting, whether we call it, whichever is net zero or whatever as we get more stringent about our environmental standards, and that we contribute to reducing emissions, are we driving the contractor or is the contractor driving us? I would hope that actually it would be us really setting the standards and pushing and making it more demanding as the contract, and is the contract flexible enough for us to become more demanding in terms of environmental standards? And I suppose my third question is just, we've seen that the government has cut back funding to local authorities for highways. How constrained are we about that? How confident are we we've actually got the money in the budget to do what needs to be done to have, firstly, safe roads and good standard roads, and roads that are moving towards constraining speed, making things safer and less polluting. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I think three good questions there. I think Councillor Larratt will comment, but correcting the situation in which we needed a much stronger client function is absolutely something that's being done here. That is a #1 priority, and I think a disappointment in the previous one. Phil, over to you to say more.
You're absolutely right, Chairman. Yes, we've got to have that strong contract monitoring team in place, and knowing that we've invested in that, I am fairly confident, in fact I'm very confident, that we will have a far better contract management regime than we've had, or there was in the past. So, you know, that's something that I know Nick has taken very seriously, and Nick wants to make sure that, and I'm sure he'll say this himself, but wants to make sure that the contract operates effectively, and it will only do that if we've got proper monitoring. So yes, I'm confident, and I know officers are as well. So yeah. Who drives net zero? Well, you know, we've got our own ambitions, and that will develop as we go forward. And I would expect our contractors to work with us, and that's what's in the contract. So, you know, we will be driving it. It may well be that they've also got their own initiatives, because we're open to them being innovative and in the way things are done, and they may well come up with some things that we may want to take on board as an authority. I think it's a question of partnership on net zero going forward. So I think, you know, we will drive it, but there may also be opportunities for them to have input. Of course, we are constrained by government finance, but again, you know, we need to look perhaps at new ways of doing things, more value for money, different ways of repairing roads and how we deal with them. You know, there's plastic surfacing you can put down now. Is that cheaper, or what are the options? You know, and I just think the technology of machinery is improving all the time, and I think we need to make sure that we take best advantage of those in order that perhaps we can deliver more with the limited amount of money that we've got. So, you know, and we will work with the contractors to do that. So, you know, I think that's about it, really. I mean, relationships, I don't know, Nick, if you want to comment on that, but we do have a very strong performance regime. I've been involved in the development of performance indicators that are at 3 levels, strategic and right the way down to operational. So I'm very confident that the performance regime will be effective. We've worked together on with the North on that as well. But Nick, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just pick up a little bit about the relationship. So I think, as Councillor has said, we have these 3 tiers of performance metrics. The lower level tier are really about operational things. So that's about the weekly or the daily operation of the contract. And the contract puts in place meetings on a weekly basis so that we can discuss those. So those kind of things will be discussed weekly as a maximum period between when they're previously discussed. Obviously, I've had conversations with the bidders and said, I don't expect you to leave it for a week before you bring up anything that is needs discussing, but there will be those regular weekly meetings. The other 2 levels of performance monitoring will happen on a monthly basis. The KPIs will be reviewed monthly, and as Councillor Larratt has said, they are quite stringent. We've tightened those above the current KPIs regime, and we've introduced some more. And the higher level, the strategic performance indicators are a maturity matrix, and that's where their commitments and their promises around social value, around net zero come into play as well. And it's through those, the maturity matrix, that they can earn extensions to the contract. So we've worked quite hard on these 3 tiers to try and ensure that we've got regular monitoring of things so that we can nip things in the bud early. And then the extra years, the extra duration for the contract is based on the relationship between us, how that's improving, and the outcomes that the council has seen through the contract.
And of course, there are sanction measures as well within the contract.
Thanks for raising those points. And now our last speaker on this one is Councillor Randall. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that you said, obviously, that speakers tonight are all about the procurement, but people out there want to know actually what it means. You know, we, like you said, we all know that our roads are in an awful state of repair. think there's potholes on nearly every road. Road markings are bad along some roads. Lots of people have had costly repairs and then have been putting claims into the council. So the two questions that I'd got really is, I would just like to know if the contract covers our roads being brought back into good repair, and when will we see a resurfacing schedule, and moving forward, whether we can expect the new contractor to be proactive rather than reactive. And if there's a penalty clause, if the contractor doesn't perform, or, you know, obviously we've got all these indicators, but in so many contractors, and both Northampton Borough and Daventry, you know, have seen some really bad contractors that we've just had to live out that time. You know, and you know, what have we got in place to secure that that doesn't happen?
Thank you, Wendy. I think the phrase sanctions a moment ago probably meant penalties, but do you want to expand at all on that, Phil?
No, I'll just say, Chairman, yes, there is a sanction regime within the contract. It's very clear and transparent, and we will be adhering to that through our positive and effective monitoring that we're going to be having with the additional staff that we've got. You know, yes, we all want to get the roads into good repair, and I want to do as much as we can as soon as we can. But we are, as we all know, strapped by the budgets that are available, and we can only deliver what we can afford. And we will continue to do that. And whatever the contract allows, and whatever new technology and whatever innovation there is, we will utilise that to ensure that we make best use of the resources that are available to do the best to improve the roads, including the resurfacing issues. And I'm aware of some of those issues in Daventry as well. So yeah, and I would expect our contractor to be proactive. I expect them to go out there on a regular basis, and as will our officers, be monitoring that they're doing that, and coming forward with priorities as well from a technical point of view, but also members will be able to feed in what their priorities are as well. So Nick, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank
So
you.
just going back then, for the general public, are they just going to see potholes being repaired and on a priority basis, or are we going to see some really good resurfacing?
We will utilise the capital budget to do major resurfacing as best we possibly can. But as I say, there may be ways we can make that money go further by utilising new technology and things like that. So yeah, I mean, we are stuck with that budget. There are issues within the finance of that we need to overcome, and I've been working on that and still trying to move that forward, and hopefully we can get back to full utilisation of the capital budget on capital projects in the not too distant future. But yeah, we want to get these roads resurfaced where we possibly can, and obviously there will continue to be pothole repairs on a regular basis. But I hope the contract will utilise or use common sense, you know, because what's the point of a contractor going all the way out to a village, you know, in deepest rural Northampton, to fill two potholes when there's one, you know, 10 feet away that doesn't meet the criteria, although it will in 6 months when they'll have to go back. So I hope there's going to be an element of common sense in the whole process as well.
Thank you, Wendy. Any other comments on this or questions from cabinet members? No? Okay. Well, thank you, Phil. I draw your attention, if I may, to the recommendations at section 3, as Phil outlined. Can I ask you to confirm, please, your agreement to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That takes us on to item 7, modern income management solution. In a moment, Mike will outline some of the highlights. Then we have one speaker, Mike, which is Councillor Danielle Stone. Over to you.
Go for it, because
Oh, the only thing is our viewers don't hear unless you use a
oh,
microphone.
okay,
yeah.
okay, we've got it. I was desperately starting to look towards Chris. He saved us in the meeting earlier, so but luckily no need to this time round. This is a report. I think it's a type of report that actually we wanted to see by moving to unitary, whereby the predecessor councils had multiple different systems and multiple different ways of payments. So bringing those together, economies of scale, standardizes a system for all residents within the area and achieves a saving through economies of scale. Just a couple of brief points to mention, because I'm sure it's a welcome report. One of the questions that was circulating prior to the report was over the fact that I think Cambridgeshire in particular play less in terms of working with our partners. Well, it's actually because it's a volume-based contract. So obviously with the number of people that we have, for example, in Northampton, it makes the volume a lot higher. The other point I was going to mention as well, to save anyone raising this question, is we are not getting rid of any payment methods. So this is adding types of payment methods rather than getting rid of them. So yeah, we will absolutely still be taking checks, which was a question that I was anticipating. That's it, Leader. Happy to propose the report and hear the comments of the speaker.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Mike. So our speaker, Councillor Stone, Danielle, welcome.
Thank you very much. And it really is a pleasure to read reports which suggest that we are moving forward in very difficult circumstances, coming out of a very difficult period of time. And I really look forward to having management solutions that, you know, where we get a lot more customer satisfaction. I'm a bit surprised though, Chair, that we are still looking at shared services after the failure of LGSS. So I just want to say that because we're told in the reports the good things that are happening, and I understand that, but we haven't got any risks. There's no explanation of any likely risks attached to it. And I would have thought sharing services was still a bit of a risk. I understand why it's looked at because of cost savings and stuff like that. But I do think there are risks. And I think one of them is under capacity in the finance teams. And to be responsible for 3 other authorities is going to add to those kind of pressures. So I'm really interested to know whether the skills we need, if we are increasing capacity, I expect and hope we are, whether the skills we need are available in the job market, because it seems to me that there is a bit of a crisis in terms of skills across the piece, planning, finance, in all kinds of areas. I think collaborative working is a skill. So I'd quite like to know how that's going to be managed from this authority. I understand this authority is going to be in charge of that. And I'm wondering whether the management costs have actually been factored into the budget as well. And I'm wondering if each authority is going to receive the same level of service. It says in answer to a question that was raised by Councillor Harris and I before, that Cambridgeshire would be getting a much lower service because their needs are not the same as ours. But I'm interested in understanding that a bit more, actually, because Cambridgeshire has got a population 2019 of 852,000, which is twice as many as us. So even though it's not a unitary, their needs must be quite high. So I don't really understand the discrepancy in the amount that is being paid into that budget. It's my quick.
Yeah, I'll take the last point last. Obviously, unitaries have far more elements of services that need payments on. So it's not just there's a lot more volume because there's a lot more services that we offer that require payments. If you think about the old services that the borough would offer, we might have a payment because we're taking a green waste charge. That's with us. A county council wouldn't have that. So that's the reason for that. You talked about a bit about being a shared service. I don't see this as a shared service, more as I see it as a shared procurement. So if you think the economies of scale from purchasing effectively a software product are going to be more by sharing that with other people. So I think that's an important point to note. The risks you talked about, the risk, you mentioned a couple of risks there. What you didn't mention was one of the risks is we're doing this as a standalone procurement, we wouldn't get the economies of scale that we need, and we also wouldn't get, so therefore we might not get the saving that we're looking for. The other thing is it has to integrate with the predecessor systems. There's so many predecessor systems that those former LGSS partners had that it makes sense to have a system that integrates with those systems that are already in place. So again, there's a risk of, if we did our own separate thing, then we'd be unraveling more of the backup systems. The easiest way I always explain it to people is it's an onion, and what we're doing in IT is we're peeling back the onion and finding other layers of onion behind it. So we're keeping this as the most simplest way to extend those methods of procurement. Lastly, you mentioned skills and under capacity. Well, this actually really helped capacity, because what we're doing, as well as having those old methods of payment like check and the traditional methods that perhaps more elderly people like, we're also having the newer methods that younger people like. So that will enable us to free up capacity. And I talk about this all the time. It's about having people interact with your authority in the way that they want to interact with. So a younger person may wonder why on earth they can't pay for something on their mobile phone at the moment. So I think that's really important as well. I think that's all of the points that are covered. I think this is an exciting project. I'll be monitoring it very, very closely. The last point I was going to make was skills and our factoring out there as an employer. I've mentioned this a couple of times. I was going to mention it at full council. I mentioned it in our meeting earlier today. Please check out our Glassdoor ratings, which is a website that people use when they're thinking about applying to various places. Our Glassdoor ratings at the moment are the highest of any local authority that I can find. They're also higher than some really well-established employers with some really good reputations, John Lewis being one and IBM being another. So people look at that when they come to us. I heard earlier there's a couple of posts that were out for recruitment for where we were inundated with applications for those quite senior positions. And that's because our Glassdoor ratings and the culture that we're fostering in this organisation are really positive. That can only have a positive effect on filling that gaps that we have in skills and in attracting people to work here. So that's why, and I say this all the time as well, HR and IT absolutely go together in this new organisation moving forward. I think that covers off the points, and I'm happy to recommend the report.
Could I just ask, Chair, thank you very much for all those answers. Can I just ask if we are going to be increasing our capacity within the service? Because that's the issue, and I understand what you're saying, and I share your joy, but we have got vacancies that we haven't been able to fill in the last year. And so if we're increasing, as I hope we are, the number of people in the service, that is the issue that I think needs addressing.
Okay, thank you, Danielle.
Yeah, so there's just clarifying there, there's no vacancies within this team at the moment, so we're not, but we have put in a new head of business systems as well as part of our strengthening of this. So clearly we'll keep it under review. Clearly we've got that new head of service post in as well. So we'll keep it under review as we move through this, but I think this will be a really helpful project.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much indeed. And I appreciate you highlighting some of the other good news there in terms of Glassdoor and so on. We only serve our residents best with empowered, engaged people who are keen to be at work. And I think that's the culture we're building. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. And I wonder if, does any cabinet member have any other comments to make on this? Lizzie, please.
I think you've just said it, but I'd also like to reiterate the thing about the Glassdoor, because that is crucial to us being attractive for the future. And I think that's a huge accolade to all those involved in getting that rating, and listening that we're above John Lewis in our rating and IBM. I mean, that is quite something. So to all those recruiters out there and people that are looking, I think that's worthy of notable.
Absolutely is. Thank you, Lizzie. Any other comments at all or questions from Cabinet? No. In which case, can I just ask you to confirm your agreements to the recommendations which are at section 3? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Takes us on to item 8. This is with Fiona, the Hunsbury Park Send unit. We then have two speakers, Councillor Harris and Councillor Stone. Fiona, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really pleased to be able to bring this paper forward. Providing school places for all our young people is a statutory duty that we hold. We are currently at risk of not being able to provide these places. A very ambitious programme has been put together to address this situation. The addition of a SEND unit at Hunsbury Park Primary School is just a part of that ambitious programme. At the moment, people are forced to attend maintained schools due to other places not being available. This is not always the best solution, and some children are not able to cope with this and therefore have no school places, as you can see highlighted in item 5.3 in the papers. The largest demand we have is for autistic spectrum and social, emotional and mental health young people on 5.4, also in the paper. Action is now required. Placing young people out of county is not only exceedingly costly, but depriving young people of the chance to be educated in their home location and be a part of their normal life in the area that they live in. Projection forecasts show future demand within West Northants indicate pupils with EHC plans will increase by 521 pupils. This is 25% increase from the 2,126 to 2,647 young people. These pupils cannot be accommodated unless a rapid increase of social education special education places are put in place. You will see from the paper that we've got an ambitious plan, excuse me, for the near future to ensure we are well placed to give these young people the chance to live their best lives. Recommendations, as you will see on the paper, is to approve the publication of the statutory notice of its intent to establish a new 50-place SEND unit catering to pupils with a primary need of ASC and Hunsbury Park Primary School. The notes following the publication of the statutory notice, a 4-week period of consultation on the matter will commence. Notes that further final decision will be required in July as to whether or not to establish the proposed SEND unit at Hunsbury Park Primary School. So this is not the last time we will bring this forward. The consultation, we hope with you agree, will start tomorrow if you agree to this. And then at the end of that, we will put together the views of the consultation and bring it back to a meeting in July for final sign off. I can't stress enough how important it is that we do address this now. We cannot leave it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you very much indeed. So 2 speakers. First is Councillor Harris. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I extremely welcome this report. It's very good news to hear that this issue is being addressed, so it's most welcome. You did refer in your narrative to the items in 5.9 and 5.10 in terms of the potential growth figures that we're looking at here. So although this is good news, it can't help but beg the question as to what next, I guess, fundamentally, because those numbers look like they're going to grow over a very short period of time, effectively. So my first question is, what's the confidence level of being able to fulfill those additional requirements within those timescales to make sure that we can build on the success of hopefully this initial unit? And the second question related to that is obviously the question would be, where are those additional facilities likely to be located? And I make that point, of course, to ensure that we've got appropriate distribution and access across the whole of West Northants, which is a fairly broad geographical area, and it would make sense to make sure that we've got fair access for all. Thank you.
Yeah, please, Fiona, if you wish to. Yeah, thank you.
I'll just start off, but I'm sure that Chris Kiernan here, who's our interim director, will be able to fill you in more detail. But we have a programme of requirements, including a special school, which we will be bringing up in a later paper. And I am actually adamant that all children should be educated near their own home. As Chris will tell you, it's something that I can only say I bang on about all the time. So it is really important to me that children do not spend hours travelling on a bus to get to school and back home again. It's really important they're in their own locality. So I'll pass over to Chris to ask you the answer the technical questions.
Okay, there were two significant questions there. The level of confidence in us achieving the programme and how to pay for it, I think. So on they're linked, obviously. So the level of confidence is reasonably high, about 500 places. So what we've got is 250 places that are agreed with existing schools, which is mainstream schools for resource provision and special schools for highly specialised provision. So those are agreed with all the schools. We've got to go through this cabinet process for most, not all of them. And the link to that, the capital is in place for all of those places. So we can be absolutely confident, provided the capital agrees, that those places are going to exist. Then the second part of the programme is a 250 place new free special school. So the level of confidence in that, we're starting the consultation tomorrow, and that'll be about a month of consultation. Then it will come back to the council's cabinet for agreement that we go out to procurement. And at that stage, cabinet will need to agree the capital available for it. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about the capital yet, but we have got a very generous capital amount from the DFE for the next 2 years. It's 12 million. And if I compare that with the previous year, it was 3.5 million. We're not spending that at the moment on anything else apart from a small issue of PFI, where that might take up 350 to $500,000. Depending on the procurement, what the procurement comes back with, there may be a deficit on that, and I'll be reporting that to the next cabinet for the amount of money the council would have to put into that pot, and it is likely there'll be a capital contribution. Now, I can't predict that until the Chief Finance Officer has looked at it and cabinet in advance of the paper going there in June.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And final speaker, Councillor Stone. Danielle, welcome back.
Thank you very much. And I too really welcome this report and thank you very much for it. But it does still raise a number of other questions, and you have answered or give us the context of some of it. I don't find £12 million capital spend for schools a lot of money at all. I know that new schools cost way more than that, and so I'm disappointed. But one of the questions I was going to ask was, would it be possible, please, for us to have a really clear understanding of what the school place need is in the round, and then what the send need is within that? Because obviously there are different ways of providing the provision. And one of the things that I'm curious about is what's happening with the MATs, what's happening with the multi-academy trust. Are people coming forward to partner us in building schools? I see that the government has just passed enabling legislation to allow local authorities to become their own MATs. Are we going to become one? I would like to see us go down that road, I have to say. But I think we need to be looking at send provision holistically within the whole context of all our schools and everything that we're offering, because like Councillor Baker, I agree with having mixed provision. You know, we need some provision in mainstream schools and we need some specialist provision, but we need to know what the pressure on school places is before we can really. And one of the things I'm worried about is us putting undue pressure on existing schools. I know a lot of schools are crying out for more library space, more lab space, more playground space, more playing field space, and we're putting more and more pressure on schools because £12 million isn't going to build all the new schools that we need in West Northamptonshire. We certainly need new schools in Northampton, and nothing is coming forward. So I'm curious about all of that, and I think it would be really kind if you could help us understand the bigger picture. Is that okay?
Thank you. Fiona, Chris, and comments perhaps?
I think I'm going to pass over to Chris to give you the detailed comments, but I just want to say that we are working with all of our schools now. We have got a very good relationship forming with our head teachers to work on what is ordinarily available, as Chris is often saying, in our schools, and how we can help them to actually work on what is ordinarily available. There are quite a lot of young people who, with some assistance, could actually cope very well in a maintained school without any problems at all. We've just got to speak to each other about these young people and make sure that the right people are in the right school, and those that can't cope are in one of our special places. And this is our programme going forward. As I said, it is ambitious, and this is just the start of it. So I'll just pass over to Chris for all those other bits and pieces.
Yes, there's several questions there, and I'll try and cover them within an overall answer. First of all, what Councillor Baker said about ordinarily available is really important. And at the moment in Northampton, schools in West Northamptonshire, there is not a really even understanding of what should be ordinarily available without extra resources. That means that some schools cope much better. And in order to have a really equitable system, we must have good quality control in the education system. We started that work through a consultation with schools, and I'm glad to say we'll be starting the secondment of 5 FTE Senkos to go out and work with all of our schools about what is ordinarily available. Now, the problem with what we've got at the moment is there are too many pupils with very high levels of need that should be in resourced or special school provision where we have no space. That means they're in mainstream schools that can't cope with them. That affects their ability to be inclusive generally. So the paradox is you've got to have more specialist places in order to make schools more inclusive. So I'll come on to the funding of that and your comment about government grant. I take your point about 12 million isn't a lot. What I was careful to say, it's a lot more than we've had in the past. And it is extremely helpful in funding a lot of what we will need in terms of capital for this outstanding provision. The other thing is, there is, of course, a government programme where we get these schools for no input from West Northants at all. It's the Free Schools Government Programme. And the government has signalled that they're going to start that in terms of special schools, not general need. The trouble is, if we get into that route, we won't have a school built until about 2028. And we just cannot wait that long. There's a revenue cost of us doing so to the high needs block. And by the time we built a free school, we'd probably be at about £12 million of deficit in that block. So that's the government grant. Then you talked about the general places in schools. Our general place planning is very, very strong here. Chris Wickens, who recently left, did an excellent job in general place planning. We have no place pressure in primary, apart from very, very isolated pressure because the population need is going down. The population need is in secondary, where we have all the places we need for the next 5 years in terms of expansion of schools, new secondary schools coming on stream and Bowles provision. It's tight in secondary, but we have all the places we need for the planned entry at year seven, and pupils coming in, for instance, refugees, and pupils that move areas in other places from England or internally in the council. So I'm very happy with that. I think that's the main thing you mentioned, apart from maths and the cooperation of local multi-academy trusts. I'm pleased to say that is reasonably good and improving. Of the specialist places that we're talking about in mainstream schools, the majority are in multi-academy trusts. And we've got a lot of interest in our specialist programme from maths.
Thank you. Can I just say, Chair, I would like to have some insight into school place pressure, and I would like to know where the conversation is going to happen in this authority about whether the authority will become a multi-academy trust and we'll start taking responsibility for our own schools. The thing that I am absolutely concerned about at the moment is the pressure on our secondary schools. We have a lot of children, I've said this so many times.
Are we straying from the point, Danielle?
In great distress because of the pressure on schools. And some of that pressure is too many schools, too many children in too tight a space with too few teachers and not enough support staff. And class size numbers are going up all the time. And we need to have a view on all of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think noted. Is that fair, or did you want to comment?
Yes, with reference to class sizes, the authority has no control over class sizes. We distribute funding that's available from the government, and it's a matter for head teachers, governing bodies and multi-academy trusts on class size. If you look at national and local data on class size, in fact, it's not growing. There may be some schools that choose to have some classes that are bigger, but overall, the class sizes in secondary are well under 30. The average class size, the ratio of teachers to pupils. And they're not over 30, and indeed legally they can't be in primary schools for 5 to 7 year olds. Now, it may well be that some pupils feel they're under pressure and overcrowded, but there's no evidence in the data that I've seen. I will go back and look at West Northants data, but of course at the moment the DfE hasn't released our new unitaries data aside from West Northants. So I will look at class size and come back to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, any other comments at all, questions from Cabinet? No, in which case recommendations as always are at section 3. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations, please? Agreed? Jolly good. Thank you. That was indeed our last item. So I thank everybody for their attendance this evening. Thank you.